See me? Good morning, everyone. Okay. Today we are doing in Mishna Shvius Perek Vav Mishna Gimel. Pitzalim Shiyardu Alayim Kshamim Mitzilfu. Onions that rain came down upon them, and they grew and they sprouted leaves. Mishnah says, Im Hayu Ha'olin Shalahem Shchayrin. If the leaves are black or dark, asurin, then we say they're forbidden. Hayriku, if they're pale, they are permissible. Now, the story is like this. The onions here that we're talking about are onions that were grown in the sixth year and they were completed in the sixth year, which either means they were taken out of the ground during the sixth year, or they were taken out of the ground in the sixth year, but they already were ready to come out of the ground. And since they are complete, they're considered the crops of the sixth year and would not have any of the laws of Shemitah. The thing is that you either illegally replanted them during the Shemitah year, which you're not allowed to do, but you did it anyway, or you never took it out and it stayed in the ground into the seventh year. And then it rained. And then new leaves sprouted out of this onion. Now, onions could actually sprout leaves even if they're detached from the ground. So the question here is, when rain falls on this onion, which is in the ground in the seventh year, we have a question, is it going to be growing more in the seventh year? Will the onion be growing more in the seventh year or not? And the difference is that if it does grow more in the seventh year, so part of it, that part that grew during the Shemitah year, that's for sure considered Shemitah produce. It's a part of an onion, but this part grew into Shemitah, so it has a status of Shemitah produce. And the thing is, though, that the halacha is that in this kind of case, we're talking about a plant, something growing, if part of it becomes forbidden, meaning if the plant grew more and that new growth became forbidden, it makes the entire plant forbidden. Even though it's the minority part of the plant, it will still make the entire plant forbidden. So if this onion grew any more during the Shemitah year, the onion itself grew any more in the Shemitah year, then that means there is part of it is Shemitah produce, and it has the prohibitions or the restrictions of Shemitah produce. Perhaps it actually even has a prohibition to eat because the sages prohibited vegetation that grows during the seventh year, vegetables, greens that grow in the seventh year. There's a prohibition that prohibits those, and perhaps these onions will be included in that. But in the very least, they'll have the new part that grows for sure has the status of Shemitah produce. But the truth is, once part of it, even a minority part of it, is Shemitah produce, the rest of it is going to become a Shemitah produce also. That's the halacha. Although we know the halacha is that if you have a mixture of something permissible and something forbidden, we say that if the permissible part is the majority over the forbidden, 60 times more than the forbidden, it nullifies the forbidden and this thing is permissible. In this case, when we're talking about something that grows, when something that grows has part of it forbidden and part of it permissible, the whole thing becomes forbidden, or takes on the status of it becomes forbidden, which in this case means the new part that is Shemitah now actually makes the whole thing Shemitah. Therefore, the point of the Mishnah is here. We have to try to determine, has this onion grown more in the seventh year or not? So the Mishnah says, you know how you know it grew more? You know how it grew more if you look at the new leaves that sprouted. What do they look like? If, as Mishnah says, if these leaves, literally translated, it means black. It doesn't mean black, it means they're dark. Then asurin, then the whole onion is forbidden. A dark leaf is a sign that this leaf was generated because the onion is nourishing again from the ground. That's what a dark leaf is a sign of. And therefore, if it's nourishing more from the ground, that means the onion's growing. If the onion's growing, the whole onion becomes forbidden, becomes Shemitah produce. The wording uses asurin, forbidden. Doesn't mean necessarily forbidden as much as forbidden from regular usage. You got to use it like Shemitah produce. But Hayriku, if let's say we're talking about that the leaves Hayriku, which literally translates mean green, but it means they're pale, then that means that these leaves were just generated from the onion itself, not from nourishment in the ground. The onion got wet, It itself now generates the leaf, but it's not from nourishing in the ground. So it's not a sign that the onion grew at all. It just means that these leaves sprouted. If the onion didn't grow, so the onion still retains its status of a 6th-year produce, and it would be permissible. That's the opinion of the Tanna Kama, the first opinion of Mishnah. Now we have Rabbi Chanina ben Antignas Ayman. Rabbi Chanina, the son of Antignas, said, he disagreed. He said to determine whether the onion grew more or not, it's not about the leaves, not about the color of the leaves, rather. If you could grab onto the leaf and pull out the onion by pulling on the leaf, that's already a sign that that kind of strong connection of the leaf to the onion, that already shows us, that means the onion grew. This leaf would not be strong enough to be able to pull the onion out of the ground by, not for the fact that the onion grew more. And therefore, to him, that's the sign the onion grew more, therefore the onion is going to be forbidden. If you can't go ahead and pull out the onion by the leaf, that means if you pull on the leaf would become attached, then that means it was just draining by the onion, but not because of taking nourishment from the ground. Then the Mishnah concludes, Ukeneged Cain, and following in the same pattern, conversely, Matzai Shabbos Mutarim, Matzai Shvius Mutarim, I'm sorry. The same thing would be, the same pattern would follow as to whether, in regard to this onion for after Shemitah. Now, what that means is like this. We're talking about here some kind of a plant that grew during Shemitah, it grew during the 7th year, and now it grew more in the 8th year. And we're saying, well, if it grew more in the 8th year, it'll follow the pattern from before. If it didn't grow more in the 8th year, it'll still become forbidden. Meaning the same way we have a pattern, if it grew more in the 7th year, the whole onion becomes a 7th-year produce. So too, the Mishnah would seem to be saying that if the 7th year now stayed in the ground to the 8th year, which we planted in the 8th year, now it grew more in the 8th year, but with Shemitah before, since the new part isn't Shemitah, the whole thing isn't Shemitah. But the Bartanura explains that can't be. It doesn't work that way. Although we say that the new growth during the Shemitah year, although it's the minority, makes the entire onion get the status of Shemitah produce, it doesn't go the other way to say, well, something that's already Shemitah, it already has the restrictions of Shemitah, now by having more growth, now having new growth in the onion from the 8th year, which is permissible, would now permit the entire onion. You're not going to say that. So the case of the conclusion of the Mishnah has to be that we're talking about that you actually had, we're talking about it was a 6th year, it started off as a 6th-year onion. It went into the 7th year, grew more, and became the 7th-year onion. And then it stayed in the ground to the 8th year, grew more, and now has 8th-year onion part of it. So part of it is you have 6th-year onion, you have part of it being a 6th-year onion, part of it being a 7th-year onion, a Shemitah year onion, and part of it being an 8th year, an after Shemitah onion. In that case where you have both you have basically two aspects of the onion being permissible, it's 6th year and 8th year, then we'll say it will change the status of the onion and become completely permitted. If it only has the 8th year growth to it, it's not going to change the status of being Shemitah produce. But if we're talking about that it has 6th-year part and 8th-year part, now it has those two parts that say that it's permissible, that it's not Shemitah produce, then the fact that at one point it had part of it that was Shemitah produce, that at one point made the whole onion be considered Shemitah produce, that now the 8th-year growth will now change its status back to a regular onion because it has part of it being from the 6th year and from the 8th year. And the same machlokes we had before as to how do you determine if there was more growth applies here also. According to the Tanna Kama, the dark leaves means that in the 8th year it grew more. According to Mishna ben Antignas, the stronger leaves, the leaves that you could pull them up by, that would be the sign that it grew more. Okay, that's the conclusion of this Mishnah. Now we'll do the Sefer HaMitzvot. Okay, Mitzvah Nun Zayin. 57, mitzvahs aseh lafrish challah me'isam litna l'kayim. You have a positive commandment to separate challah from a dough and to give it to the kohen. Shneimar, the pasuk states, reishas arisay seichem, the first of your dough, challah tarimu, you shall separate challah. The part you separate, that's called challah. So when you have a dough, so the first of the dough, a part of the dough has to be taken off as challah. The echad mechamisha minei dagin. Now, if we're talking about a dough made of any of the 5 grains, the 5 grains being wheat, barley, spelt, oats, and rye, im yesh bi'isasai, if a dough that's made from them contains a volume of memigmo beitza v'chaimish beitza, of 33 and a fifth eggs, if the dough contains that volume, chai b'chala, then that dough is an obligation of separating challah from it. If it's less than that, there's no obligation for challah. There's no obligation for challah, and you can eat it without separating challah. Ubechutz la'aretz mafrishin challah medivrei sefer. Outside of Eretz Yisrael, we separate challah midrabanan. It's rabbinical law. It's not a Torah obligation. Why? Shlotistakach Torah's challah. The reason given is so that the law of challah shouldn't be forgotten. If we want to keep it in chutz la'aretz, outside of Eretz Yisrael, then it will be forgotten outside of Eretz Yisrael. The Tzitz doesn't want that to happen. And therefore, you separate it. You don't give it to the Kohen. The sarf and oisa, you burn it. That's what we do nowadays with challah. We burn it. Uminat Torah ein lo shir. According to Torah law, there is no set amount of how much you have to give. Elokol shechatichas isa. Any small piece of the dough, paiter will exempt the dough from the obligation of challah. The mitzvah of challah we perform, and then you can eat the dough. Practically speaking, nowadays there's a question: what exactly constitutes this volume of 43 and a fifth eggs? And therefore, basically work with that. If we don't work with a volume, just to make it easier, we work with a weight. And if you use a 2.5 pound bag of challah or 3 pound bag of challah, you'll separate. A 2.5 or 3 pound bag of flour, the dough you make from that amount, you'll separate challah without a bracha. And once you hit 5 pounds, once you use a 5 pound bag, the dough is made with 5 pounds of flour, then you would separate the challah and make the bracha. Have a great day. Take care.